I was just a few steps away from my car when I saw it. The faint scent of smoke, then the sight of thick, black clouds curling into the night sky. My heart dropped. No. Not this. I broke into a sprint, but by the time I reached it, the flames had already spread, licking the sides of the car like a hungry beast. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. I stood frozen, shock running through my veins. My mind screamed for answers. Who would do this? Why? I scanned the street. Empty. Silent. A car burned to the ground, and no one saw a thing. And then, it hit me, this wasn't just about my car. It was a warning. But from who? And why me? I had no answers yet, but I knew one thing for sure, this was just the beginning. I'm a federal prosecutor, someone who deals with criminals every day, people who think they can get away with anything. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for the real danger lurking in my quiet suburban neighborhood, the HOA. At first, it was just annoying, ridiculous fines for the smallest things, a slightly overgrown lawn, a misplaced trash can. But as I pushed back, they didn't back off. No, they got bolder. They started making up rules, nitpicking every detail of my life, like they had nothing better to do than make my world miserable. I thought I could ignore them. Until they crossed the line. They weren't just trying to control my property, they were trying to break me. And that's when I realized, this wasn't a fight about rules. It was a war. They messed with the wrong person, and I was ready to show them just how far I'd go to protect what's mine. They didn't know who they were dealing with. I had made it clear that I wasn't intimidated by their little games, but the HOA wasn't about to back down. It all started with a trivial issue, something so small that it barely registered at first. I had parked my car too far from the curb, and they slapped me with a fine. No warning, no explanation, just a notice demanding payment. At first, I thought it was a mistake. But when I called them to clarify, the HOA representative was smug, practically daring me to challenge them. "It's the rules," he said. "You have to follow them, or we'll keep fining you." I could feel his arrogance through the phone, and it lit a fire in me. I refused to pay. I sent them a letter, citing legal grounds, explaining that their actions were overreaching. I didn't care about their petty rules, I was a federal prosecutor. If they thought they could intimidate me, they were wrong. I made it clear that I wasn't afraid of their fines, and if they wanted to take it further, we could go to court. That's when things started to escalate. The next week, I received not one, but 3 separate violations for things that didn't even exist. My lawn wasn't up to code, my fence needed repairs, and my trash bins weren't properly tucked away. It was clear as day that the HOA was coming after me. Every little issue was being blown out of proportion, and it felt personal. I could feel the pressure mounting. I wasn't just dealing with petty bureaucrats anymore, I was up against an organized group that was willing to do anything to break me. My neighbors were starting to notice too. Some of them were too scared to speak up, but I could tell they were quietly rooting for me. Then, the warnings started. More fines. More threats. They weren't just going after my property anymore, they were hinting at legal action, even suggesting they could take me to court. I was being cornered, but I wasn't backing down. I wasn't scared. I wasn't going to let them control me. But as I prepared my legal response, something inside me started to shift. I had been so focused on fighting back, so confident in my position, that I hadn't stopped to ask the most important question: what were they really after? That was when it hit me. The HOA wasn't just angry at me, they were trying to break me. And they were about to take things way too far. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary that night. It was just another quiet evening, until I stepped out the front door. The first thing I noticed was the smell, something burning, faint but sharp in the air. And then, as my eyes scanned the street, I saw it. Thick, black smoke pouring from the hood of my car, the flames licking at the edges like a living, hungry beast. My heart slammed in my chest as panic set in. I sprinted toward my car, every step feeling like it took an eternity. Neighbors were already gathering at the end of the block, their faces illuminated by the orange glow. Some looked shocked, others stood too still, too silent. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. "Call the fire department," someone shouted, but I was already there, helpless, staring at the damage. I could feel the heat of the fire even from a distance. As I approached, my blood ran cold. This wasn't an accident. It was deliberate, personal. There was no way this was random. I'd been targeted. Then it hit me, the HOA. My mind raced through every interaction, every threat they'd made. This was them. They had finally pushed it this far. By the time the fire department arrived, the car was a total loss, nothing but a charred frame left behind. They started spraying water, but it was too late. The damage was done. As I stood there, trying to process what had just happened, my eyes caught something strange, a note. It was tucked under the windshield wiper, half-burned but still legible. It wasn't much, just a few words, scribbled hastily, "You should have followed the rules." My breath caught in my throat. Did the HOA really go this far to get back at me? Or was there something even darker behind it? My instincts screamed that this was just the beginning. I wasn't about to sit around and let this slide. As a federal prosecutor, investigating wasn't just my job, it was my instinct. I knew how to dig deep and connect the dots, and I was going to use everything at my disposal to find out who was behind this. The first thing I did was request footage from the neighborhood security cameras. I spent hours combing through recordings from the night of the fire, trying to spot anything suspicious. It didn't take long for the pieces to fall into place. One camera showed a shadowy figure near my car just moments before the flames appeared. The figure was cloaked in a hoodie, but something about the stance, the movement, it felt too familiar. Then, I started applying pressure on the HOA. I wasn't asking questions directly, I didn't need to. I'd been in enough high-stakes situations to know how to make people nervous without saying a word. And nervous they were. As I watched them, I could see it in their eyes, they were hiding something. Their denials felt too rehearsed, too defensive. I dug deeper. Turns out, the HOA had been involved in more than just petty fines. There were whispers about shady dealings, about them bullying other residents into compliance with vague threats. And then, I found it, a key piece of evidence. A name. A former HOA board member who had a history with fire insurance claims. It all started to make sense. This wasn't about parking fines or lawn maintenance, it was about something much bigger. And the HOA's dark secrets were slowly unraveling. I had them. But the question still haunted me, was this just a warning, or had I uncovered something far more dangerous? I wasn't waiting anymore. Armed with the evidence I'd gathered, I knew it was time to confront the HOA. The tension in the room was palpable as I sat across from their board members, who still insisted they had nothing to do with my car being torched. Their lies were thick, but so was the evidence I had, footage, witness statements, and that damning name linked to shady fire insurance claims. They tried to stay calm, but I could see the sweat forming on their foreheads. I pressed harder, knowing this wasn't just about a car, it was about exposing their corruption. And then it happened. A key witness stepped forward. A neighbor had been watching from their window when the fire started. They'd seen one of the HOA board members near my car, acting suspicious. The shock on their faces was priceless. With my legal expertise, I filed the papers. I knew the law would crush them, but the real satisfaction came from watching them crumble. They couldn't keep up the act anymore. The legal consequences were inevitable. And just like that, they folded. The HOA admitted to their role in the incident, and it wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about the abuse of power, the bullying they'd done to the whole neighborhood. I didn't just win justice for myself, I'd protected my community from them forever. The victory wasn't just legal. It was personal. Looking back on everything that happened, there's a sense of justice, but also a lesson learned. Never underestimate the quiet ones, especially when they know the law. The HOA thought they could intimidate me, make me follow their petty rules, but they didn't realize I was no ordinary resident. I had the power of the law on my side. This victory wasn't just about getting revenge for my car, it was about standing up against the abuse of power. When people think they can get away with anything, the consequences can be dangerous, not just for one person, but for an entire community. I'll always keep my eyes open now. Because I know what happens when people believe they're untouchable. And I'll never let that happen again.